Hello everyone. Thank you all for tuning in once again to Tales by the Fire. I apologize for the lack of videos this week, but if you watched my last video you'd know that I was out of my house the past few days. Well, out of my country, really. But I am back, and before we start with the video I'd like to inform you all of two changes to upcoming episodes of this series. The first being that from now on I'm going to be reading multiple chapters per video, as considering some chapters are so short they'll only make 5-minute long videos, it would take quite a while to finish this story if I kept doing things like that. The second change is that from now on I'm going to start the video with just stating the chapter instead of an intro, because to be honest the intro it's getting a little bit tedious. Well, with those two pieces of information out of the way, let's get started with the story. Chapter 14. Blood. The sky was still dark as I fled from that accursed town. The waning moon lit my path as I ran in the night, trying to put as much distance between me and that accursed town as I could. I remembered the man's face clearly, the vivid anger and hatred in his eyes as he tried to kill me. He had wanted revenge for his fallen comrades that I killed. "Kill that girl," I whispered in his ear as I tried to dodge his strike. "And I will pay you full compensation for the lives of those other men." The man had refused, though, and only when I took the chance to run off had he turned his attention to that creature. I hoped that he killed her before she had a chance to change, I thought to myself. Although I knew the chances of that were slim, and even if she were dead, I would still have to face the wrath of her brother and the nation of Iraqi. It would be easy enough to disappear, though. In such a large world, it was easy to make oneself unknown. I had done it before. Finally, I could run no longer, and was forced to stop and rest. Thoughts of the past, bloody and tearful, filled my mind, and I compared myself then to myself now. The two versions of myself were completely different, and I couldn't really decide which one I liked better. I laid back and looked at the stars for a while as I caught my breath, then cleansed my broadsword in the quiet solitude, carefully wiping every bit of dust from the markings so carefully engraved in the blade. I felt sleep closing in on me, and I wrapped myself in my bedroll. My eyes were just barely closed when I heard the sound of footsteps approaching slowly. I wouldn't have stirred but for the scent of what accompanied that sound, a scent I knew all too well. I sat up, opening my eyes as the girl approached. She did not seem injured, but something about her stride was off. Her hazel eyes were locked with mine, but were strangely unfocused. She wore only my long coat, which hung past her knees, and her bare feet did not stumble on the rocky ground. I reached for my dagger as she approached, and I noticed that her red hair seemed especially so in the moonlight. It was then that I realized it was streaked with blood. She dropped the supplies she had been carrying and collapsed to the ground next to me, breathing heavily. She lay there on her side, eyes open and staring at me blankly. Suddenly she coughed, her sides heaving, and blood poured from her mouth and onto the ground, pooling around her head. Blood stained her face, her lips, her fingernails, and I thought once more of killing her then and there. But even one as cold as I couldn't kill a creature in such a state. Slowly her mouth curved into a smile, although her eyes remained lifeless. "I'm glad you're safe," she whispered, and then fell into a deep sleep. I glanced again at the puddle of blood she was lying in, and wondered how many she had killed. And I wondered how many she had killed for that much blood to be in her stomach. The thought nauseated me, and I could bear the scent no longer. I rose to my feet and grabbed the girls and my belongings. I carried them over the next hill before returning for her. As I saw her lying there motionless, I thought of leaving her there, defenseless to any beast, whether man or animal, that came along, but I saw the unhealed wound in her hand. Still, I hesitated, but suddenly my mind was filled with thoughts of another time, and a quiet song filled my head. I grabbed the girl and threw her over my shoulder where she hung, limp, until I dropped her to the ground next to her belongings. Then I got up and walked away until I could no longer smell the stench of blood, before I laid her down and fell asleep. My dreams that night were troublesome, and filled with those two faces I tried to forget, along with that creature, whose bloody fangs haunted me even in my sleep. Chapter 15. Assassin by Night. The scent of blood, that acrid, metallic smell, was everywhere around me as I awoke. Immediately I sat up and looked around, trying to clear my head and remember where I was. I thought back to the last thing I could remember. Blood. That was it at first, until more images and scents flooded my mind. A knife, darkness, an assailant. I could remember seeing Dante hurt, and leaping forward to help him, but that was it. Still feeling as if fog surrounded my mind, I looked around, trying to get my bearings. The sun was rising on the horizon, and softly blowing grass assured me that I was outside. I looked down at my hands. There was blood under my nails. I stood up hastily, and realized I was wearing Dante's long coat and nothing else. My face instinctively flushed red, although his coat came up past my collarbone and down below my knees. I stood up quietly and looked around. I breathed a silent sigh of relief, and thanks to Varrock when I saw that Dante was lying only a few feet away, sleeping. Trying not to startle him, I looked through our packs, which were lying on the ground, until I found a change of clothes. Then I breathed in deeply, my nose picking out a scent of water. I trotted quietly off until I came up across a shallow stream, lined with scraggly brush. I stripped off Dante's coat and slid into the chilly water. Goosebumps rose up from my skin as I scrubbed the blood from under my fingernails, and also from my face and hair where it dried to form a layer of evidence. I had killed someone. My stomach sank, and I felt ill. I had injured people far too many times in the past, but this was the first time I had killed someone. True, I had tried before, but now there was blood on my hands, both literally and figuratively. Sudden nausea clutched me as I heaved, but my stomach was empty. With shaking hands, I finished rinsing my hair. With every fleck of dried blood, I felt more and more sick. Part of me knew that this would not be the last time I would kill. After I had finished washing, I put on the fresh change of clothes, enjoying the feel of the soft cotton on my skin, so different than the rough cloth that I had been forced to wear back at the castle. I pulled Dante's long coat over my shoulders and strapped Cass's dagger to my belt before returning to where the bodyguard had been resting. I was not surprised to see that he was no longer there, and I didn't blame him. I was a murderer. I didn't deserve his company, although I had only been trying to defend him. but I followed after his scent anyway, after picking up my bags which he had left behind. After only a few short minutes of jogging, I could see him up ahead, and I broke into a run. He didn't glance back, although I knew that he was aware of my following him. I walked by his side and glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. His face was set and difficult to read, even more so than usual. I frowned and gave up, leaving him some privacy and silence. For hours we walked along in silence, except for my occasional bouts of coughing. Finally, as the sun was high in the clear sky, Dante stopped, and we both ate a small meal before continuing. After the sun began to set, I could see lights from a small village up ahead, and couldn't help but feel eager. Despite the anxieties weighing on my mind, I still wanted the opportunity to see more of the world. As we drew closer to it, I could tell that Dante was trying to decide whether or not to stop. After I coughed again, though, my sides heaving roughly, he made up his mind. "We're stopping in that town for the night," he said simply. "Thank you," I replied, a small smile playing at my lips. I wonder if he had decided that out of kindness, or if he had some business in the town himself. The town's fortified gate was beginning to close as we approached it, and Dante and I hurried inside. The walled town was very quiet compared to the previous one. The few people standing about in the square stared as we walked in, and it grew more and more quiet. I put my hand on Kaz's dagger and stepped closer to Dante so we could protect each other should a fight break out. "Relax, and get away from me," he hissed quietly under his breath. "This town is near the border of Kirkaba, so it's normal for it to be wary of strangers and closed in by walls. Don't do anything stupid." I stepped away from him and continued looking over the town as he made a beeline for a rough, weather-beaten building, probably the inn. Stray cats slunk out from the alleys for their nighttime hunting as the people went inside to sleep. The shops were packed together and immaculate, but as the shop owners closed their windows, no one stopped by for a chat. I felt uneasy and was happy when Dante opened the door to the inn. Inside the inn was lit by flickering candles. An overweight woman sat at the desk, counting out coins. She looked up as we approached, recognition in her eyes. "Dante the mercenary, is that you?" she asked, feigned cheerfulness in her beady eyes, too small for the roundness of her face. He nodded and leaned against the counter, pushing his hair back from his forehead. He didn't seem all that pleased to see the woman, although he obviously knew her well. "I'd like a room for the night. How much is it?" he asked. "That'd be 10 gold pieces for our nicer room, with 2 beds," she said, greed in her eyes as Dante pulled out a sack of coins. How much for your smallest, most inexpensive room?" he asked, frowning as he continued to count the coins he had. 5 gold pieces, she said, frowning and suddenly losing all of her cheerfulness. "Let me pay," I said, stepping forward and pulling 5 gold coins out from the pouch Cass had given me. Dante didn't protest this time, and the innkeeper snatched the coins from my fingers. "Who might you be?" she asked curiously. I sensed a bit of kindness in her for the first time. "Can I get you anything? I doubt Dante is the most caring travel companion." "She's of no importance," Dante stated stoically. I looked to the innkeeper and smiled. "He's right, I'm no one important. Thank you for the kind offer, but there's nothing that I need. And Dante is, kind to me." She laughed, a deep throaty sound that made it hard not to join in. "Well, here's the key, miss. Make sure that the mercenary sleeps on the floor," she said with a wink. I blushed and took the key from her. "Have a nice night," I murmured and tossed the key to Dante. He caught it easily and headed up the narrow staircase. The inn room was small and cozy, the homemade quilts thrown over the straw mattress. A window overlooked the town, and I couldn't help looking out for a moment before unrolling my bedroll on the floor and curling up in it, tiredness pulling at my eyelids. Dante didn't argue and climbed into bed, pulling the covers over himself. I sat up and glanced at him, but in the darkness was unable to make out his face. "Good night, Dante," I said quietly, but he didn't answer, although I knew he wasn't asleep. Quickly, I sunk into a deep sleep, illness still making me exhausted. However, it seemed only moments had passed when I heard the noise and woke up. Dante was getting up, and I knew that he was going to do something important. Hearing the door close behind him, I made up my mind quickly and stood up. I made sure to unlatch the window before I followed him down the stairs, being sure to remain silent and out of sight. Pressed against the wall, I could hear his quiet conversation with the innkeeper. "Any jobs that need to be done?" he asked quietly, emotionlessly. "There always are," she said with a grim laugh. "The justice system is horrible as ever. We need more people like you who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty." Dante was silent. The innkeeper continued. "How about this? You take care of this guy, and I'll pay you 60 gold coins." The innkeeper proceeded to describe the man and where he could be found. The description of his crimes he had committed shocked and appalled me. "It's a deal," said Dante, and I heard the scrape of a chair being pushed back from a table. I ducked back around the corner as Dante exited through one of the side doors in the inn. Once I had heard the innkeeper return to her room, I darted across the door and slipped out into the night, using my nose to follow Dante. In only minutes, I caught up to him, and was sure to remain out of his sight and silent. I wasn't quite sure why I was following him. Curiosity, perhaps? Along with the simple want to make sure he survived his journey to protect me, mostly uninjured. Moving like a snake, Dante opened a window and slipped out into a rundown house. I followed, and then crept up the stairs after him, praying he wouldn't turn around and mistake me for an enemy. The voices approached, and it took a few moments I had to duck into the room Dante had entered. The floor was slick with blood, and there were bodies of 2 men, their throats slit. I turned away and ran back to the stairs. Not bothering to run down them, I leapt and landed on the foot of the staircase, then sprinted out the door, thanking Varrock for my silent stride. I dashed into the inn, and, using a rain barrel as foothold, quickly slipped into our room through the window, closing it behind me. I was relieved to see that Dante had not yet returned, so I snuck down the stairs, wondering if I could catch another conversation. I was in luck, and I could hear him speaking with the innkeeper. "It's done. I took care of another 2. They were talking about a man they were planning to kill, and his wife they were going to rape," said Dante, his voice more cold than I had ever heard it be before. But I didn't blame him for it. My blood ran cold too, at the thought of how horrible humans could be, and still go unpunished. "Good job," said the innkeeper. I heard the sound of money being sorted, and then I heard Dante stand up.
Be good to that girl, Dante,
she said.
I'd hate to see something horrible happen to her, or for her to get wrapped up in your business somehow.
Dante didn't answer, and I heard him head for the stairs. I darted back to our room quickly, and by the time he had returned, I was feigning sleep. He'd laid back down on the bed, and within minutes was asleep, exhaustion, no doubt. Strangely, I was not surprised that Dante was an assassin. Even more odd, it didn't bother me. The smell of blood clung to him, but it had done the same to my own flesh that very morning. I slipped into sleep, wondering what the next day would bring. Chapter 16. Arrival. The sun had already risen when we left the small town. The girl had been her usual self all morning, which surprised me, considering what she had seen the night before. Perhaps she did not know that I had been aware of her presence. As we walked, I wondered why she had followed me then. Could she have just been curious? Or was she plotting something? Either way, it was lucky for me that she did not go out to kill me. Only when she had coughed did I notice that she was following me, and even then, it was difficult to keep track of her. The sun was setting as I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. She was smiling to herself, and looked about, marveling at everything she saw. For a moment, I saw another face when I looked at her, and pain tore through me. But in a second, the feeling was gone, replaced with the usual disgust. Did she really have no idea that she were only hours away from her own death? Surely if she had a scrap of intelligence, she would have noticed that something was wrong by now. Finally, I could see the walls of Inokai, the second largest city in all of Kokoba. We had already crossed the border, which of course she had asked 100 questions about. I breathed a sigh of relief. It wouldn't be much longer till I was rid of her. A horseman rode by, and as he and his steed passed, the horse slowed by the girl's side, nickering softly to her. I had never been interested in horses, those unintelligent creatures, but apparently the girl liked them. She stroked the neck of it as it stopped beside her, much to the anger of its rider, who spurred his mount in the sides. The horse leapt forward and cantered off, its ears still pointing back toward the girl, who was murmuring something quietly. The girl became silent and frowned for a moment, then looked at me, smiling. She looked young all of a sudden, like someone half her age. "I've always loved horses. That was nice, but my brother's horse is just as beautiful. I've always wanted to ride one." I said nothing, and walked on. The girl didn't try to make any further conversation, to my relief. I quickened my stride as we grew closer to Inokai. The sooner I was rid of this creature, the better. The way she spoke irritated me so much. It was as if she didn't know she was a monster, while at the same time she considered herself lower than even an assassin such as myself. Finally, we entered the city. The cobbled ground felt nice on my feet after hours of dusty roads. The city seemed a bit more run down than the last time I had been here. Buildings everywhere were coated in a layer of chipped paint and dust. Even the people had a tired look about them. Few even glanced up at our arrival, despite the girl's brilliant red locks and my dark hair marking us as foreigners. The girl looked around, smiling like an idiot. She seemed to think this grungy city was the most awe-inspiring thing in the entire world.
"This is wonderful, Dante,"
she said, her hazel eyes bright. The sound of my name from her lips made me cringe, when I thought about the blood that had stained them only days ago.
There are so many people! I've never seen a city this large. Is this the capital?
No, I said simply, scanning the town for the military building where I had been told to drop her off. I spotted it, and strode toward it, the girl following closely at my side. Once again, she was sticking vexingly close to me, as if we were in danger. Little did she know that it was her life that was in jeopardy, not mine. I pushed open the doors, which seemed to be in better shape than most of the city, although the hinges still gave an unearthly squeal. Inside the building, some curious guards glanced over, but I ignored them and followed the signs directing me toward the general's office. He would be the one in charge of her disposal. I felt some pity for him, having to endure her, even if it was only for a short while. Vaguely, I wondered how he was going to have her killed. Stabbed through the heart, poisoning, suffocation. I prayed for his success in ending her existence, and also that she would not change into that monster, that she could at least die in the form of a human.
"Where are we going?"
she asked, her voice quiet, as if she had guessed at my dark thoughts. General's office. Can't you read? I muttered, irritated. She was silent for a moment and looked away, as if she had something to say. Thankfully, she kept her lips closed. Again, I wondered if she was beginning to suspect something. He'll direct you toward the medical building from here. Your father told me to entrust you into his care. I lied smoothly. She stopped suddenly, and so did I. Fearing she had realized what had happened, I began to reach for my dagger. She lifted a hand and laid it on my arm. Her touch made me flinch, but I didn't pull away, wondering if she would attack.
"Thank you for everything you've done,"
she said, her voice quiet and full of emotion, though her face betrayed nothing.
I don't know if I would have made it this far without your help. It was good of my father to send you with me. I'll always be grateful to him because of that.
I bit back a laugh, as if her father was worried about her safety. He only sent me as protection for his secret. It's not like she had difficulties defending herself. That was one thing I was sure of. I said nothing for a moment, trying to think of a proper response. Nothing came to mind, however. "Let's go," I said simply. She smiled and nodded.
"I've been waiting for this for so long."
We walked a bit further, then I saw the general's office. I knocked once, and heard a gruff voice on the other side. "What is it?" I opened the door and stepped in. The general was younger than I had expected, perhaps only a decade older than myself. His eyes and hair, like most citizens of Kokaba, were a sandy brown, while his skin was tan. His face was severe and angular, although his eyes were strangely soft. I wonder how one like him had become a general. But when his eyes focused on the girl, and he had realized who she was, his expression changed. His eyes, that seconds ago had been gentle, now had as much softness as the sword on my back. It was clear to me that he was experienced with killing. He did not see her as a woman, but as a monster. "This must be the girl that someone important sent here, am I correct?" he asked me, looking away from the girl and ignoring her presence completely. "You are? I leave her in your care then, General," I said, feeling relieved. "Thank you. Oh, your wages are to be accepted at Castle Varrock," he added, as if it were an afterthought or something he had nearly forgotten. My blood ran cold, and then began to heat up. I had been expecting to accept my earnings here. So that was the king's plan. He had tricked me as easily as he had fooled his own daughter. I should have realized it sooner. He intended to have me disposed of as well. The second I reached the castle, I would be killed, if not sooner. I hid my surprise easily. Of course. Goodbye, General. I turned to leave.
Goodbye, Dante. I hope I can see you again after this is all over, she said.
I ignored her words, the last ones I would hear from her, and shut the door behind me. As I went back through the building, I was surprised that the guards didn't just immediately attack me. I kept one hand on my dagger as I went back into the main area of the town. My mind raced as I struggled to formulate a plan. I needed to disappear, and to do that, I needed money. The small earnings from my last 2 jobs would not last me long, especially if I needed to go into hiding. With Varaki and Prince Casimir soon to be after me, I needed to go into hiding immediately. But in order to survive while keeping a low profile, I needed money. I debated between staying in Inokai or fleeing right away. However, the closing of the city gates made that decision for me. Despite my feelings of being trapped, I stayed calm. I headed for the inn, glad that in Inokai there was sure to be plenty of jobs for the taking, and plenty of money to earn. If I took several jobs tonight, I would leave tomorrow with enough money to hide for a while. I had done it before, and I could do it again. Already I felt more at ease. I found myself humming that song under my breath. Painful memories made me shudder, and I stopped humming, turning my mind toward more pleasant thoughts. The girl was gone, and I no longer would have to bear her disgusting presence. Even now that I knew that my life would be in danger, that I had been tricked by King Alaric, I still felt better than I was when I was with her. As I entered the inn, I heard some women gossiping eagerly, and instinctively I listened intently.
"Did you hear about what happened in Madokai?"
one whispered, her voice quiet and fearful.
"What happened?"
another asked, her voice eager for a juicy story.
"In one of the smaller towns, there was a massacre. Over 20 villagers were killed. It wasn't anyone in particular either. The victims were old ladies, young children. May Koko have mercy on that town. Who did it?"
asked one of the women, fear in her voice as she invoked the name of her god.
"They're thinking it was a pack of animals that broke the vow of Madokai and attacked the country's townspeople. The wounds were horrific and couldn't have been inflicted by a human. That's what I heard anyway." "That's horrible,"
the woman said, her voice trembling. I stopped listening to their conversation as it turned toward normal, pointless matters, specifically some woman's relationship with her husband, as well as another man. Luckily, I didn't need any more information. I had enough. Although they hadn't said the name of the town, I knew which it was. There was one explanation. That night, in that accursed town, we had been fleeing, and I had left that creature behind, hoping our attacker would kill her. She had murdered those people in her rage, and that's why her stomach had been so full of blood, and why she had it all over her face, hands, and lips. Now, it was I who felt almost nauseous as I went to speak to the innkeeper. In my mind, I could see that creature's gleaming fangs. I hoped it had a slow, agonizing death. That girl was truly a monster.